The lawyer's envelope sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake. My daughter Jessica and her husband Brad sat across from me, their faces wearing that special kind of smile people reserve for delivering terrible news they think is good. "Mom," Jessica said, reaching across to pat my wrinkled hand with her manicured one. "We need to talk about the house. I'm Dorothy Chen, 72 years old, and before I tell you what happened next, I need your honest answer. If your own child sold your home right out from under you to pay their gambling debts, would you have stayed silent like I did? Or am I a fool for what I'm about to confess? Keep that thought, because by the end, I want your verdict." The morning light streamed through the lace curtains I'd hung 40 years ago when Thomas and I first bought this place. Every corner of this house held a memory. The kitchen door frame still bore the pencil marks tracking Jessica's height from age 5 to 18. The living room carpet, though worn, covered the spot where Thomas proposed on one knee, nervous as a schoolboy. The back bedroom where I'd sewn wedding dresses for half the neighborhood, earning every penny that paid our mortgage. Brad cleared his throat, his cologne too strong, his tie too bright. "Dorothy, you know we've been struggling. The economy, my business setbacks, Jessica's medical bills." I knew no such thing about medical bills. My daughter looked healthier than she'd been in years, her skin glowing, her clothes expensive. But I stayed quiet, my calloused hands folded in my lap like I was praying. Maybe I was. "We had to make a difficult decision," Jessica continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone children use when they think their parents have lost their wits. "We sold the house. It closes in 30 days. We found you a wonderful assisted living facility. It's got activities, nurses, other people your age. You'll love it." The words hit me like cold water. Sold the house, my house, the home Thomas and I built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. The place where I raised Jessica, where I buried my grief after Thomas died, where I thought I'd take my last breath. "You sold my house," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Brad leaned forward, his smile widening. "Actually, Dorothy, technically speaking, it's our house. You remember you signed it over to Jessica 3 years ago for tax purposes." The lawyer explained it all. It was the smart thing to do. 3 years ago, I remembered that day with perfect clarity. Jessica had come over with papers and tears, explaining how the transfer would protect the house from estate taxes, how it was just a formality, how nothing would change. I'd signed because I trusted her, because she was my daughter, because after Thomas died, she was all I had left. "We needed the money, Mom," Jessica said, her voice hardening slightly when I didn't immediately congratulate her on stealing my home. "Brad's business debts, they were going to take everything. This way, we start fresh. You get professional care. Everyone wins. Everyone wins." I looked around the kitchen where I'd made 42 years of Christmas cookies, where I'd taught Jessica to bake, where I'd cried when Thomas's cancer came back. The refrigerator still had Jessica's kindergarten artwork held up by magnets shaped like strawberries. Strawberries because those were her favorite. I'd remembered. Did she remember anything about me? "The assisted living place is really nice," Brad added, pulling out a glossy brochure. "They have bingo on Thursdays." Bingo on Thursdays. As if that replaced a lifetime of memories. As if that compensated for the garden where Thomas planted roses every anniversary. As if that made up for the attic full of Jessica's baby clothes I'd hand-sewn and saved for grandchildren who never came. "When do I have to leave?" I asked, surprised my voice came out steady. 30 days, Jessica said, relief flooding her face at my apparent cooperation. "We'll help you pack. You won't need much. The facility is furnished. Just clothes and personal items. Personal items. 42 years reduced to personal items. I thought about the original deed locked in my safe deposit box. The one from before the transfer. The one that had Thomas's name and mine written in permanent ink. I thought about the clause I'd insisted on. The one Jessica and Brad's lawyer had glossed over. The one that said the transfer was valid only as long as the property remained in Jessica's name and wasn't sold without my written consent. But I said nothing. I just nodded. I just smiled that same placid smile old women are expected to wear when their children steal their lives. "Thank you, Mom, for understanding," Jessica said, standing up, eager to leave now that the dirty work was done. "We'll check on you at the new place. It'll be an adventure." An adventure? Like I was going to summer camp instead of being discarded like worn-out furniture. They left, their expensive car gleaming in the driveway that Thomas had paved himself one hot summer, teaching Jessica to mix cement while she laughed and got more on her clothes than on the ground. I stood in my kitchen, the silence pressing down like a physical weight, and I remembered. I remembered everything they'd forgotten. Jessica was 7 when Thomas lost his job. We ate rice and beans for 6 months rather than miss a single mortgage payment. Jessica was 12 when she needed braces. I took on extra sewing work, my fingers bleeding from pushing needles through tough fabric in bad light. Jessica was 17 when she wanted to go to college. Thomas worked 2 jobs until it killed him, his heart giving out 2 months before her graduation. Jessica was 23 when she got married. I paid for the wedding because Brad's family was too proud to contribute, but not too proud to show up and eat the expensive food I couldn't afford. Jessica was 30 when she got divorced. I mortgaged my paid-off house to cover her legal fees because she'd married wrong and loved badly. Jessica was 32 when she remarried Brad. I said nothing about his gambling, about the rumors, about the way he looked at her like she was a lottery ticket instead of a person. Because she loved him. Because she was happy. Because I remembered being young and in love and thinking love was enough. But love isn't enough. Not when your daughter looks at you and sees a problem instead of a person. Not when your son-in-law calculates your worth in square footage and market value. Not when your home becomes their solution. I made tea, the same kind Thomas used to drink, and I sat in his chair by the window. The afternoon light made patterns on the floor. The same patterns it had made for 42 years. I'd watched those patterns while nursing Jessica. I'd watched them while crying over Thomas's death certificate. I'd watched them while sewing wedding dresses for strangers who paid me enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to feel secure. And now I watched them one more time, knowing everything was about to change. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed Thomas and I had shared for 38 years, staring at the ceiling we'd painted together the summer Jessica turned 10. She'd helped, leaving tiny handprints in the corners that I'd never painted over. Now those handprints would belong to strangers. The next morning, I drove to the bank downtown. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from age, but from something else. Something that felt like anger, though I'd trained myself not to feel that emotion. Good women don't get angry. Good mothers don't fight back. Good widows accept their fate with grace. But maybe I was done being good. The bank manager, Robert Chen, my nephew 3 times removed, greeted me with his usual warmth. "Aunt Dorothy, wonderful to see you. What brings you in today?" I asked for my safe deposit box. He led me to the vault, that cold room with walls of metal drawers containing people's secrets and treasures. My box was small, number 247, the same number as the house address Thomas had been so proud of. Inside were things Jessica didn't know existed. The original deed from 1983, yellowed but legal. Thomas's life insurance policy, the one that had paid off the mortgage after he died. The addendum to the property transfer Jessica had signed 3 years ago, the paragraph her lawyer had rushed through. The clause that said any sale required my explicit written consent, my signature notarized and witnessed. And one more thing, a letter from Thomas written 3 weeks before he died, when he knew the cancer was winning. My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're facing something difficult. I wish I could be there to protect you, but I'm leaving you something better than protection. I'm leaving you the truth, written down, legally binding. The house is yours. It was always yours. No one can take it without your permission. Not the government, not creditors, and not even Jessica, though I pray she never tries. I made sure of it. The lawyer, my old friend Michael Bradford, he made sure the paperwork was airtight. Trust yourself, my love. Trust your strength. You've always been stronger than you know. You raised our daughter. You saved this house 12 times. You survived me leaving. You can survive anything. And if Jessica ever forgets what you sacrificed, what we built, what we gave her, then you have my permission to remind her. Sometimes the people we love most need to learn the hardest lessons. I'll be waiting for you, but take your time. Live your life. Fight your battles. Win your wars. All my love, Thomas. I sat in that cold vault room and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not sad tears, angry tears, relieved tears. Tears of a woman who'd forgotten she had claws because she'd spent so long being gentle. Robert knocked softly. Aunt Dorothy, are you all right? I need to make copies of these documents, I said, my voice steady now. All of them. Certified copies. And I need Michael Bradford's phone number. Robert's eyes widened slightly as he glanced at the papers. He was a smart boy. He understood immediately. Michael retired 5 years ago, he said carefully. But his daughter Hannah took over his practice. She specializes in property law. She's very good. Some say better than her father was. Set up a meeting, I said. Tomorrow, if possible. I'll call her now. 24 hours later, I sat in Hannah Bradford's office. She was 40, efficient, wearing a gray suit that meant business. Her office overlooked the city, glass and steel and money. Nothing like the home I was fighting for. Mrs. Chen, she said, shaking my hand firmly. Robert explained the situation. I've reviewed the documents you sent over. I knew your husband. My father spoke of him often. Said he was one of the most meticulous men he'd ever met. Thomas was careful, I agreed, especially about protecting what was his, what was ours. Hannah spread the papers across her massive desk. Here's the situation. Your daughter and son-in-law are operating under the belief that the property transfer 3 years ago was absolute. Their lawyer, and I use that term loosely because he missed this clause entirely, never explained that the transfer had conditions. What conditions exactly? I asked, though I knew. I needed to hear her say it. The property could be transferred to Jessica for estate planning purposes, but any sale, mortgage, or lien required your written consent. Not a verbal agreement, not an assumption. Your actual signature, properly witnessed and notarized. Without it, any sale is void. They're closing in 30 days. Then we stop the closing. Hannah leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, I need to be clear. If we pursue this, you'll be in direct conflict with your daughter. Family cases are messy. They're painful. They destroy relationships that are already fractured. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Jessica at 7, holding my hand at Thomas's hospital bedside. Jessica at 17, crying on my shoulder when a boy broke her heart. Jessica, at 23, radiant in her wedding dress that I'd stayed up 3 nights straight to finish. Jessica yesterday, telling me I'd love bingo at the assisted living facility while selling my home to cover her husband's gambling debts. I'm prepared, I said. Hannah nodded, respect flickering in her eyes. Then let's begin. First, I'll file an injunction to stop the sale. Second, I'll notify their lawyer of the clause they overlooked. Third, we'll demand a meeting, all parties present, to discuss resolution. What kind of resolution? That depends on what you want, Mrs. Chen. Do you want the house back in your name? Do you want financial compensation? Do you want them prosecuted for attempting fraud? I hadn't thought that far. I'd been so focused on stopping the sale that I hadn't considered what came after. I want my home, I said quietly. I want them to understand what they tried to take. I paused, searching for words. I want them to see me again. Really see me. Not as a problem or a burden or a woman who'll just accept whatever they decide. I want them to remember who I was before I became convenient to forget. Hannah's expression softened. Then that's what we'll fight for. But Mrs. Chen, I have to warn you, sometimes when we force people to see us, we don't like what we find in their eyes. I already don't like what I see, I admitted, so I've got nothing left to lose. 3 days later, the injunction was filed. 2 days after that, Jessica called, her voice shaking with rage. Mom, what did you do? The closing is stopped. There's a legal hold on the house. Brad's going crazy. We need this money. We'll lose everything. I let Jessica yell for 3 full minutes. She called me ungrateful, senile, cruel, manipulated by lawyers who wanted my money. She said I was destroying her life, ruining her marriage, killing her future. When she finally ran out of breath, I spoke calmly into the silence. I didn't sign the consent form for the sale. The silence that followed was worse than her yelling. What consent form? Jessica's voice had changed, gone small and scared. The one required by the property transfer agreement? The one your lawyer should have told you about? The one that means you can't sell my house without my written permission? That's impossible. Our lawyer said everything was legal. Your lawyer was wrong, or lazy, or both. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow, the way she used to breathe before panic attacks in high school. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me wanted to watch her panic the way I'd panicked when she told me about the sale. Mom, please, she whispered, and now she sounded young again, vulnerable. We need this. Brad's in real trouble, not just gambling debts. There are people, dangerous people, and if we don't pay them by next month, something bad is going to happen. We needed the house money to fix it, to save us. My heart clenched. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. Still the little girl who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms. Still the teenager who'd told me I was her best friend. Then come over, I said. Tomorrow, noon, you and Brad, we'll talk. I hung up before she could argue, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The next day, I set the table carefully. My good china, the set Thomas bought me for our 20th anniversary. Fresh flowers from the garden. Tea in the pot I'd used for every important conversation of my married life. I wore the blue dress Jessica had always said made me look elegant, the one I'd worn to her second wedding. When the doorbell rang precisely at noon, I was ready. I opened the door to find Jessica looking like she hadn't slept, her makeup unable to hide the dark circles. Brad looked worse, his swagger gone, replaced with something that might have been fear. Come in, I said, gesturing to the kitchen. They sat in the chairs they'd sat in 3 days ago when they'd announced my eviction. Everything was the same. Everything was different. "Thank you for seeing us, Mom," Jessica started, but I raised my hand. "Let me speak first, then you'll have your turn." They nodded, looking like children called to the principal's office. 42 years ago, your father and I bought this house. We were young, poor, terrified. The mortgage felt impossible. But we had something your generation seems to have forgotten. We had commitment, not just to each other, but to the idea that some things are worth protecting. This house was one of those things. I poured tea with steady hands. Your father worked himself to death to keep this house, literally. His heart gave, out from stress, from too many shifts, from saying yes to every overtime opportunity because we had bills to pay and a daughter to raise and a home to protect. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't finished. I worked too, sewing wedding dresses until my fingers bled, taking in alterations, doing laundry for rich families who paid poorly, but at least paid. When you were at soccer practice, I was at my machine. When you were at sleepovers, I was hemming pants. When you were at college, I was working to pay for it. Mom, I know you sacrificed. Do you? I asked, my voice sharp for the first time. Do you know that I gave up my own dreams to pay for yours? Do you know that I could have been a designer, could have had my own shop, could have been something more than a neighborhood seamstress? But I chose you. I chose this house. I chose stability over ambition because that's what parents do. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Jessica's tears were falling now. And when you married the first time, I continued, and it fell apart, who mortgaged this paid-off house to cover your legal fees? Who went back into debt at 63 to save you from your mistakes? You did, Jessica whispered. I did, because you're my daughter, because I love you, because that's what Thomas would have wanted. I set my teacup down with deliberate care. But love has limits, Jessica. And you found mine when you sold this house without telling me. When you planned to warehouse me in an assisted living facility so you could pocket the money. When you looked at me and saw a problem instead of a person. It wasn't like that, Jessica said desperately. Brad was in trouble. We didn't know what else to do. I turned to Brad. Tell me about these dangerous people. Tell me about the gambling debts. Tell me the truth, because if we're going to fix this, I need to know what we're fixing. Brad looked at Jessica, who nodded. He took a deep breath. I got involved in online gambling 2 years ago. Sports betting at first. I won some, lost some. Then I started chasing losses, taking bigger risks, using credit cards, taking loans. His voice dropped. Then I found a private game, high-stakes poker. I thought I could win it all back. Instead, I lost everything. $50,000 to people who don't accept apologies or payment plans. Who are these people? I asked. Does it matter? Brad's laugh was bitter. People who break things when they don't get paid. People who sent me pictures of what they did to the last guy who welched. People who know where we live, where Jessica works, where your grandchildren would go to school if you had any. The last part hit hard. I'd wanted grandchildren, had dreamed of teaching them to sew, to garden, to bake cookies. That dream died years ago when Jessica declared herself child-free, too focused on career and lifestyle to consider motherhood. Now I understood that decision differently. You can't bring children into chaos. How much do you owe total? I asked. $68,000 with the interest they're charging, Brad admitted. The house would have cleared it all with money left over to restart. I stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept important papers. I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. This is the original deed. This is the property transfer agreement you signed with the clause about my consent. This is a letter from your father explaining why he insisted on that clause. And this is a certified bank statement showing that I have $92,000 in savings. The silence in my kitchen was absolute. Jessica stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Brad's mouth hung open. You have $92,000? Jessica finally managed. Where did that come from? From 40 years of sewing wedding dresses, I said simply. From taking every extra job, from saving every penny, from never taking vacations or buying new furniture or splurging on anything. From living like a poor woman while secretly being comfortable, because that's what Thomas taught me. Never show your hand. Never let anyone know exactly what you have. Never become a target. But you let us think you were struggling? Jessica said, something like accusation creeping into her voice. You ate soup for dinner. You wore old clothes. You never went anywhere. I chose to live simply, I corrected. There's a difference between being poor and choosing not to waste money on nonsense. Your father and I learned that difference during the hard years. You apparently never learned it at all. Brad leaned forward. Dorothy, if you have that money, you could help us. You could pay off my debts, keep the house. Everyone wins. I looked at him the way you'd look at a snake that learned to speak. Everyone wins? Like how everyone won when you sold my house? Like how I won when you planned to put me in a facility with Thursday bingo while you two started fresh with my equity? Mom, please, Jessica interrupted. We made a mistake. A huge mistake. But Brad's right. If you paid his debts, we could transfer the house back to you. Make it like it never happened. Except it did happen, I said. And I can't unknow what I know now. I can't unsee what I've seen. You didn't come to me asking for help. You didn't explain the situation and request a loan. You stole my house in secret and told me about it as a done deal. We were desperate, Jessica said. Desperate people make terrible choices, Mom. You know that. You're not perfect either. Remember when Dad died and you were so depressed you didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks? I took care of you. I was there. The accusation stung because it was true. After Thomas died, I'd fallen apart. Jessica had come over, made food I couldn't eat, cleaned the house, held me while I cried. For 2 weeks, she'd been the parent and I'd been the child. I'd never forgotten her kindness during that dark time. You're right, I admitted. You were there when I needed you. Which makes what you've done now hurt even more. Because I know you're capable of compassion. I've seen it. Which means this betrayal was a choice, not a character flaw. Jessica crumpled, her head dropping to the table. Her shoulders shook with sobs. Brad just looked defeated, all his anger drained away. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Hannah Bradford had been right. Family cases are messy because family is messy. Love and betrayal tangled together until you can't separate them anymore. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice softer now. I will pay Brad's debts, all $68,000. But there are conditions, non-negotiable conditions. If you violate any of them, I'll take the house back immediately, and you'll owe me every penny I paid out plus interest. They both looked up, hope and fear mixing on their faces. First condition, I said. Brad enters a gambling addiction program. Inpatient treatment, not just meetings. I'll pay for that too. 3 months minimum. Brad nodded quickly. I'll do it. Whatever you want. Second condition, the house goes back into my name. Not a transfer, not shared ownership. My name only. You'll live here rent-free while I continue to live here too. When I die, it'll be yours in the will, but not before." "That's fair," Jessica said. "More than fair." "Third condition," I continued, my voice hardening. "Brad gets a job. A real job. Not self-employment, not business ventures, not opportunities. A job with a paycheck and a boss and accountability. And he keeps it for at least 2 years. "I will," Brad promised. "I'll work at McDonald's if I have to." "Fourth condition," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "You spend 2 hours a week with me. Not obligatory visits. Real time, cooking together, talking, being present. 2 hours where I'm not your burden or your bank account. 2 hours where I'm your mother and you're my daughter." Jessica's tears fell harder now. "I'd love that, Mom. I've missed you." "And final condition," I said, pausing for effect. "You both attend therapy, together and separately. You need to understand how you got here. How your marriage became so broken that selling your mother's house seemed like a reasonable solution. How Brad's addiction nearly destroyed everything. How you, Jessica, learned to value money over people." "We'll do it all," Jessica said quickly. "Everything you said. We'll do it right now. Today." I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. There's one more thing. The most important thing." They waited, barely breathing. "You acknowledge what you did. Not just to me, but to yourselves. You write it down. An actual letter. Handwritten. Explaining exactly what happened. Why it was wrong, and how you'll do better. You give that letter to Hannah Bradford to keep on file. If you ever try something like this again, that letter becomes evidence of a pattern. Do you understand?" "Yes," they said in unison. "Then we have an agreement." I pulled out the contract Hannah had prepared, the one I'd been hoping I'd need. The one that outlined every condition, every payment, every consequence. They signed with shaking hands. When it was done, I made more tea. We sat in uncomfortable silence, sipping from china cups, pretending this was normal. Pretending we hadn't just drawn up a legal contract to govern our family relationship. Pretending love was enough when we'd all just proven it wasn't. "I really am sorry, Mom," Jessica said finally. "I know you are, sweetheart, but sorry doesn't undo the hurt. It just means you acknowledge it. The real work comes next, in proving you've learned something." "I have learned something," she insisted. "I've learned that I took you for granted. That I stopped seeing you as a whole person and started seeing you as my mother, like that was your only identity. Like you existed just to support me." "That's a good start," I acknowledged. Brad stood up abruptly. "I should go make some calls. About the treatment program. If I'm doing this, I should start immediately." "There's a place in Phoenix," I said. "Care and Treatment Center. They specialize in gambling addiction. I already called. They have an opening next week." He stared at me. "You already researched treatment centers? Before we agreed to anything?" "I research everything, Brad. That's how I survived 40 years of marriage, raised a daughter, and saved $92,000 while everyone thought I was poor. I plan ahead." He laughed, a sound mixing relief and disbelief. "You're terrifying, you know that? In the best possible way." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen again. The papers were signed. The money would be transferred tomorrow. Brad's debts would be paid. The next morning, I woke to find Jessica sitting on my porch. She'd brought coffee from the expensive place downtown, the kind with foam art on top. "I couldn't sleep," she said when I opened the door. "Kept thinking about everything, about how close I came to losing you completely." I took the coffee, letting her follow me inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light making patterns on the floor. The same patterns Thomas and I had watched 42 years ago. "You didn't lose me," I said. You hurt me. There's a difference. I know. And I want to explain something. Not as an excuse, just as an explanation. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. When I was 10, remember that year Dad lost his job? Of course. We ate rice and beans for 6 months. I remember being embarrassed, seeing my friends with new clothes and toys while we had nothing, feeling ashamed that my lunch was always leftovers. I promised myself I'd never be poor again, that I'd marry someone successful, have money, live differently. She paused. I think I've been chasing that security my whole life, and Brad, he promised me that life. Good income, nice house, vacations. For a while, we had it. But it was a lie, I said gently, built on credit cards and gambling wins that never lasted. It was a lie, she agreed. And when it fell apart, I panicked. All I could think was that I was about to become that 10-year-old again, poor and ashamed and struggling. So I did the terrible thing. I took from you because I knew you'd survive it. You always survive. Her words hung in the air between us. You're right, I said finally. I would have survived. I've survived worse. But Jessica, you can't protect yourself by destroying the people who love you. That's not strength. That's cowardice. I know that now. She took a shaky breath. Growing up, I saw you as invincible. You never complained, never broke down, never asked for help. I thought that meant you didn't need anything, that you were fine on your own. I wasn't fine, I admitted. I was lonely after your father died, terrified of being a burden, scared that if I asked for anything, you'd see me as weak. So I pretended to need less than I did. And you believed the pretense because it was easier. That's the thing about family, Jessica said. We lie to each other to be kind, and then the lies become the truth in everyone's mind. You pretended to be strong. I pretended everything was fine. Brad pretended he could control his gambling. We all pretended until the pretending nearly destroyed us. We sat in silence, drinking coffee, listening to the house settle around us. Can I show you something? I asked. I led her upstairs to the attic, a space she hadn't visited in years. I pulled out an old trunk, the kind with brass corners and leather straps. Inside were wedding dresses, dozens of them, carefully preserved. These are the dresses I made, I explained. Every single one from 42 years of work. I kept them because each one represents a story. This ivory one with the lace sleeves? That was for Mary Chen, who married her high school sweetheart after he came back from war. This champagne one with the pearl beading? That was for Sarah Johnson, who'd been widowed and found love again at 50. This simple white sheath? That was for Emma Rodriguez, who was 6 months pregnant and getting married anyway, because she loved him and didn't care what people thought. Jessica touched the fabrics with reverent fingers. They're beautiful. Why did you keep them? Because they mattered, I said. Not just the dresses, but the women who wore them, the stories they represented, the dreams they carried down the aisle. Each dress was someone's happiest day, and I got to be part of creating that happiness. I never knew you kept them. You never asked. The words came out sharper than intended, but they were true. When you were growing up, you knew I made wedding dresses. But you never wanted to see my work, never expressed interest in learning to sew, never asked about the brides or their stories. To you, it was just Mom's job, the thing that kept me busy and paid the bills. Jessica's face crumpled. You're right. I was so busy being embarrassed that you weren't a lawyer or doctor or something impressive that I never saw the art in what you did, the skill, the care. It hurt, I admitted. Watching you dismiss my work as beneath you? Watching you chase a life that looked successful from the outside, while forgetting that real success is about meaning, not money. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. For being ashamed of your work. For thinking less of you because you weren't wealthy or educated. For forgetting that you gave up your dreams so I could chase mine. I pulled out one more dress from the bottom of the trunk. Deep ivory silk, hand beaded with pearls, with a cathedral train. This one, I said, was supposed to be yours. Jessica gasped. You made me a wedding dress? For your first wedding. I started it the day you got engaged, worked on it every night for 6 months, custom designed for you. Your measurements, your style, your dream. But I bought a dress? From that boutique downtown? I know. You told me the dress you wanted, the designer label, the price tag. You were so excited about it that I couldn't tell you I'd already made you one. So I packed this away. Thought maybe someday, if you remarried someone worth the dress, I'd give it to you. Mom, Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. May I see it? I lifted the dress carefully. In the attic light, it glowed. Every bead hand-sewn, every seam perfect, every detail exactly as I'd imagined it on my daughter. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever created. I don't deserve this, Jessica said. You don't, I agreed. Not yet, but maybe someday, if you do the work, if you rebuild who you are, if you learn to value things that matter, maybe then you'll deserve it. Or maybe your daughter will wear it, if you ever have children and teach them better than you were taught. Jessica hugged me then, careful of the dress between us, and we both cried. For what was lost, for what might still be saved, for the complicated, messy reality of loving someone who hurt you, but who you can't stop loving. 2 weeks later, Brad left for treatment. The day before he left, he came to see me alone. I need to say something, he started. I've been thinking a lot about the man I've become, the lies I've told, the people I've hurt, and I realized I never properly apologized to you. You signed the contract, I said. That was apology enough. No, it wasn't. A contract is just words on paper. This is different. He sat down heavily. My father was a gambler. Lost everything we had when I was 12. House, savings, my college fund. We lived in a shelter for 6 months. I swore I'd never be like him, never repeat his mistakes. But you did. I did worse, because I knew the damage gambling causes, and I did it anyway. I thought I was different, smarter, more controlled. Classic addict thinking. He looked directly at me. And then, when I lost everything, I did exactly what my father did. I stole from family. He stole from my grandmother. I stole from you. Different generation, same crime. I know what you're thinking right now. Some of you are nodding, believing Brad's remorse is real. Others are judging me hard for enabling them by paying those debts. Drop a comment with your honest reaction. Team Dorothy or Team Jessica? I genuinely need to know if I was justified, because what I'm about to tell you next might change your answer completely. Brad looked at me with eyes that held genuine shame. My father died alone, he continued. No one came to his funeral except me and my mother, and she only came to make sure he was really dead. Everyone he'd stolen from, everyone he'd betrayed, they stayed away. He died knowing he'd destroyed every relationship that mattered. He paused. I don't want that to be my story. Then make different choices, I said, starting today. That's what I'm trying to do. But Dorothy, I need you to understand something. When Jessica suggested selling the house, I knew it was wrong. Knew it would hurt you. But I convinced myself it was necessary. Survival mode thinking. The kind that makes you justify anything. Why are you telling me this? Because if I'm going to get better, I need to stop lying. To you, to Jessica, to myself. So here's the truth I haven't said out loud. Part of me resented you. Resented that Jessica loved you so much, called you for advice, compared me to her perfect dead father. Part of me wanted to take something from you just to prove I could. The honesty stunned me. That's remarkably self-aware for an addict. My therapist says I'm good at analysis, just terrible at application. He smiled weakly. I can see all my flaws clearly. Just can't seem to stop repeating them. But Phoenix, that's going to change. 3 months away from everything. From Jessica, from gambling opportunities, from the life I've built that's really just a house of cards. I hope so, I said sincerely. For Jessica's sake. For yours. Can I ask you something? Brad leaned forward. When you decided to help us instead of letting us crash, what changed your mind? You could have let the house sale fall through, kicked us out, moved on. Why didn't you? I thought about his question. Because Jessica is my daughter. And despite everything, I remember who she used to be before life made her hard. I remember the girl who cried when we found an injured bird and nursed it back to health. The teenager who volunteered at the shelter every Saturday. The young woman who told me I was her hero. People change. People get lost, I corrected. There's a difference. Jessica lost herself chasing security. You lost yourself chasing the win. But lost things can be found again. It's harder than staying found in the first place, but possible. After Brad left for treatment, Jessica moved back into her old room. Just temporarily, she said, until Brad comes back and we figure things out. But I knew better. She needed space from the life they'd built, the same way I'd needed space after Thomas died. Sometimes you have to step back from everything familiar to see it clearly. We fell into a routine. I'd wake early, make coffee, sit at the kitchen table with my sewing. Jessica would come down around 8, shower, dress for work. We'd have breakfast together, like when she was in high school. Mom, she said one morning, can you teach me to sew? I looked up from the hem I was working on. Why? Because you're right. I dismissed your work without understanding it, and I want to understand. Want to know what you spent 40 years doing while I was too self-absorbed to pay attention. So I taught her. Basic stitches first, threading the machine, how to cut a pattern. She was terrible at it, impatient, frustrated when things didn't work immediately. This is impossible, she said after her third failed seam. How did you do this for 40 years? Practice, patience, necessity. When you have no other options, you learn fast. But slowly, she improved. Her seams got straighter, her stitches got smaller. Her frustration transformed into something like pride when she completed her first simple apron. I made this, she said, holding it up. It's crooked and the stitches are uneven, but I made it. You did, I confirmed. And that feeling, that pride in creating something with your hands, that's what I felt with every wedding dress. I get it now, she said softly. Why you kept them. They weren't just dresses. They were proof you existed, proof you mattered, physical evidence of your time on Earth. Everyone needs that, I said. Some people get it through children, some through careers. I got it through fabric and thread and 42 years of brides. Jessica hung her crooked apron on a hook by the kitchen door. It stayed there, a reminder of her learning, of her trying, of her beginning to understand. Hannah Bradford called 6 weeks into Brad's treatment. Dorothy, we need to meet. There's been a development. My stomach dropped. Developments in legal cases are never good news. I drove to her office the next morning. She looked serious, professional, the way lawyers look when they're about to deliver bad news gently. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her desk. "I received a call yesterday from a detective. He's investigating a case involving online gambling rings. Your son-in-law's name came up." "What kind of case?" "Money laundering, illegal gambling operations, fraud. Brad's poker game wasn't just a casual private game, it was run by organized crime. The people he owes money to are part of a larger operation that's been under investigation for 2 years." The room seemed to tilt. "Are you saying Brad's in danger?" "I'm saying Brad's involvement may be deeper than he told you. The detective wants to interview him. And you. And Jessica. They need to understand the full scope of his participation. He's in treatment, in Phoenix. Can't they wait?" "They can wait," Hannah said carefully. "But Dorothy, you need to prepare yourself. If Brad was more than just a gambler, if he was helping them move money or recruit other players, he could be facing charges. Serious charges." "He wouldn't," I said. But even as I said it, I remembered his confession. "Part of me wanted to take something from you. People who think like that are capable of anything." "I hope you're right," Hannah said. "But the detective is coming tomorrow. We'll meet here. Bring Jessica. Be honest about everything. The money you paid to his debts, the contract, all of it." That night, I told Jessica. She took it worse than I expected, her face going white, her hands shaking. "He promised me," she kept saying. "Promised me it was just gambling. Just bad luck and worse judgment. If he was involved in something criminal, if he lied about that too, I don't know what I'll do." "We'll deal with it," I said, more confident than I felt. "Whatever comes, we'll deal with it together." The next day, we met Detective Marcus Rivera. He was 45, tired eyes, the look of a man who'd seen too much and believed too little. "Mrs. Chen, Miss Chen, thank you for meeting with me. I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything about Brad's gambling." So we told him everything. Jessica explained how it started small, how she didn't notice at first, how by the time she realized the scope, they were drowning. I explained about the house, the money I'd paid, the treatment program. Detective Rivera took notes, his face unreadable. "Did Brad ever mention names? The people running the game?" "Someone called Constantine," Jessica said. "And a man named Eddie with the iron face. He said Eddie once, then wouldn't talk about him again." Rivera's pen stopped moving. "Eddie Mancuso? I don't know his last name. Brad just called him Eddie." Rivera closed his notebook. "Mrs. Chen, Miss Chen, I need to be very clear about something. Eddie Mancuso is the head of a criminal organization that runs illegal gambling operations across 4 states. He's been on our radar for 5 years. We've never been able to build a case that would stick." "What does that have to do with Brad?" I asked. "Your son-in-law played in games run by Mancuso's organization. We have him on surveillance footage going into known gambling locations. We have financial records showing money movement that matches their patterns. What we don't know is whether he was just a victim or a participant." "A participant in what?" Jessica's voice was small. "In recruiting other players, in helping move money, in being part of the organization instead of just being used by it." Rivera leaned forward. "Here's what I can tell you. If Brad was just a gambler who got in over his head, he's a victim and we want to help him. If he was working for them, actively participating, he's complicit in multiple felonies. The difference matters." "He's in treatment," I said. "In Phoenix. At Karen." "I know. We've been in contact with the facility. He's agreed to speak with us when he completes the program. But I wanted to talk to you first, understand the family situation, get a sense of who Brad is beyond the criminal record we're building. Criminal record? Jessica whispered. Pending, Rivera clarified. Nothing formal yet, but Mrs. Chen, the $68,000 you paid to clear his debts, that money went to Mancuso's organization, which means you're now on our radar too, as someone who made a large payment to known criminals. The room went cold. I was paying my son-in-law's gambling debts. I didn't know it was organized crime. I believe you, Rivera said, but the law doesn't care about intent as much as it cares about action. You gave a substantial amount of money to criminals. That's a problem. What kind of problem? Hannah Bradford had been silent until now. The kind where my client becomes a witness in your case instead of a person living her life? Rivera smiled slightly. You're good, counselor. Yes, that's exactly the kind of problem. We need Mrs. Chen to testify about the payment, the circumstances, everything she knows. In exchange, she gets immunity. So does Ms. Chen if she cooperates. And Brad? Jessica asked. Brad's future depends on what he tells us and how useful that information is. If he can help us build a case against Mancuso, he gets a deal. If he protects them, he goes down with them. After Rivera left, Jessica and I sat in Hannah's office in silence. I can't believe this, Jessica finally said. I thought we were dealing with gambling debts. Now it's organized crime and federal investigations and possible jail time. For Brad, I clarified. Not for you. You didn't know. But I benefited. We were going to use that house money to pay these people. Doesn't that make me complicit too? It makes you a victim, Hannah said firmly. You were married to someone who lied to you, who put you in danger without your knowledge. The detective understands that. As long as you tell the truth, you're protected. Mom, Jessica turned to me, her face stricken. I almost made you an accessory to organized crime. Because of my marriage, because of my choices, I nearly destroyed you. But you didn't, I said. I paid the money voluntarily, with full knowledge. Well, not full knowledge, but enough. I made my choice. Now I'll live with the consequences. The consequences include testifying in federal court, Hannah pointed out. Are you prepared for that, Dorothy? It's not a small thing. You'll be cross-examined, questioned about your finances, your relationship with Brad, everything. I'm 72 years old, I said. I've survived a dead husband, a betrayed trust, and 40 years of difficult sewing. I think I can handle some lawyers. Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared. Hannah walked me through testimony procedures. Rivera gave us updates on the investigation. And Brad, from Phoenix, called Jessica every night, swearing he'd only been a gambler, never a participant, never complicit in anything criminal. I'm not sure I believe him, Jessica admitted one night. He's lied about so much. How do I know this isn't another lie? You don't, I said. That's the hard part about loving someone who's betrayed you. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal with words, only with time and proof. Do you trust him? I don't know him well enough to trust or distrust him, but I know you. And I know you're strong enough to handle whatever truth comes next. Jessica looked at me with something like wonder. How did you get so wise? By making mistakes, I said. By trusting the wrong people, by staying too long in situations that hurt me, by learning lessons the hard way. Wisdom isn't about being smart. It's about surviving stupidity. She laughed, a real laugh for the first time in weeks. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Even when you're terrible, even when you break my heart, even when you sell my house without permission, I love you. That's the blessing and curse of being someone's mother. The love doesn't turn off, no matter how much you might want it to sometimes. Brad came home 3 months later, 60 days clean, 90 days sober, with a certification in addiction counseling and a promise to stay in aftercare. He looked different. Thinner, older, but somehow more solid, like he'd finally grown into his body. The reunion at the house was awkward. Jessica hugged him carefully, like he might break. I shook his hand, formal and distant. "Welcome home, Brad." "Thank you, Dorothy, for everything. The treatment, the second chance, not giving up on me when you had every reason to." "I didn't do it for you," I said honestly. "I did it for Jessica. Don't ever forget that." Brad's first week home was tense. He slept in the guest room while Jessica remained in her old bedroom. They circled each other like strangers, polite but distant, trying to figure out if their marriage still existed or if they were just two people living in the same house. Detective Rivera came back 3 days after Brad's return. This time, he brought another detective, a woman named Lisa Chen. No relation, but the coincidence made me like her immediately. "Brad," Rivera started, "we need to have a serious conversation. About Eddie Mancuso, about your involvement, about what you know." Brad sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, looking like a man preparing for confession. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "Everything I know, everything I did, everything I saw. But first, I need to say something to Dorothy and Jessica. I need them to hear this from me, not in a courtroom." He turned to us. "I wasn't just a gambler. Rivera's right. I recruited 3 other players for Mancuso's game. Friends from college, guys I knew had money and weak impulse control. I got a finder's fee for each one, $5,000 per person." Jessica's face went white. "You recruited people?" "I needed the money. My losses were mounting, and Mancuso said if I brought in fresh players, he'd wipe out part of my debt. So I did. I told myself it was okay because they were adults making their own choices. But I knew better. I knew the game was rigged, knew they'd lose, knew Mancuso would hook them the same way he hooked me." "Did you help move money?" Detective Chen asked. "Sometimes. They'd give me cash to deposit in different banks. Small amounts, under $10,000 to avoid reporting requirements. I'd deposit it, transfer it to offshore accounts, take a cut. I thought I was being smart. Really, I was being used." "How much money?" Rivera's pen was moving again. "Maybe $200,000 over 6 months. My cut was 10%. $20,000 that I lost back to them in the games anyway." The number hung in the air. Jessica stood abruptly. "I need air." She walked out to the back porch. I could see her through the window, her shoulders shaking. "Is that everything?" Rivera asked. "That's everything I did. But there's more I know. Names, locations, details about how the operation works. I'll tell you all of it, but I need to know what happens to me." Rivera exchanged a glance with Chen. "That depends on how useful your information is. If you help us take down Mancuso's operation, you're looking at a plea deal. Probably probation, restitution, community service. If you hold back, if you lie, if you protect them, you're looking at 5 to 10 years federal prison." "I'm not protecting anyone," Brad said firmly. "I'll testify. I'll wear a wire if you need me to. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." "Why the change?" Chen asked. 3 months ago, you were deep in their pocket. What changed?" "I got clean," Brad said simply. "And when you're clean, when your head's clear for the first time in years, you see things differently. You see that the life you built is a lie, that the people you thought were friends are predators, that you've become someone you hate." He looked at me. "Dorothy asked me once why I resented her. The truth is, I resented everyone who had what I didn't. Stability, peace, real relationships. I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I tried to pull everyone down with me, including your daughter. That's remarkably honest, I said. Probably too honest for a police interview. Rivera smiled. Actually, that kind of honesty is exactly what we need. Brad, here's what happens next. You'll work with us, give us names and details, possibly testify in front of a grand jury. In exchange, we'll recommend a plea deal. But understand, this process takes months, maybe years. Your life is on hold until this is resolved. My life's been on hold for a long time, Brad said. At least now I'm holding it for the right reasons. After the detectives left, Jessica came back inside. She looked at Brad for a long moment. I don't know if I can stay married to you. I know, he said. And I'll understand whatever you decide. But Jessica, I need you to know something. Everything I did, every terrible choice, it wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I loved myself more. Loved the image, the lifestyle, the fantasy of who I wanted to be. I loved the idea of us more than the reality of you. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, Jessica said. It is, he agreed. But it's true, and if we're going to have any chance, we need truth. Even the sad, ugly parts. I need time, Jessica said. Time to figure out who I am separate from you. Time to decide if I want to rebuild or start over. Take all the time you need, Brad said. I'll be here or not here, whatever you need. For the first time in our marriage, I'm putting you first. They stood there in my kitchen, two people who'd loved each other badly, trying to figure out if they could love each other better. I left them alone, giving them space for a conversation I couldn't help with. That night, I sat on my back porch, looking at the garden Thomas and I had planted. The roses needed pruning. The herbs were overgrown. Everything needed attention I hadn't given it while dealing with crisis after crisis. Mom? Jessica came out, wrapped in an old blanket. Can I sit? Of course. She sat beside me, pulling the blanket around both of us, the way we used to sit when she was little and had bad dreams. I think I'm going to leave him, she said quietly. Not right away. Not until the legal stuff is settled. But eventually, I think this marriage is done. How do you feel about that? Relieved, she admitted, and sad, and guilty, and free. All of it at once. Is that normal? Very normal. The end of a marriage is like a death. You mourn what was, what could have been, what you thought you were building, but you also feel relief that the pain is ending, that you can finally breathe. Did you ever think about leaving Dad? The question surprised me. Once, when you were 3, he'd made a bad investment, lost a lot of money, and for a few months, we barely spoke. Just lived around each other, cold and angry. I packed a bag, got as far as the car. What stopped you? You. You came running out of the house with your teddy bear, asking where I was going, if you could come too. And I realized that leaving would solve nothing, would just create different problems. So I stayed. We worked it out. Learned to communicate better, to fight fair, to be partners instead of adversaries. But you stayed for me? Jessica said. That's different than staying for the right reasons. Is it? I stayed because I loved you more than I hated him at that moment, and that love gave us time to fix what was broken. By the time you were 5, we'd fallen back in love. Deeper than before because we'd survived something that could have destroyed us. Jessica pulled the blanket tighter. I don't think Brad and I can survive this. Too much betrayal, too many lies. Even if I forgive him, I don't think I can forget. Then don't, I said. Don't force forgiveness that isn't real. Don't stay in a marriage that's dead. You're only 35. You have time to rebuild, to find someone who treats you better, to learn from this and choose differently. That's what scares me, she admitted. What if I don't learn? What if I just repeat the same patterns with someone new? Then you'll learn from that too, I said. Life is just a series of lessons, sweetheart. Some we pass, some we fail, some we have to retake until we finally understand. We sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Mom? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. You're my daughter, I said simply. That's not conditional love. That's not something you can lose by being terrible. It's permanent, unchangeable, frustrating, and completely certain. 3 months later, Brad pleaded guilty to money laundering and illegal gambling facilitation. The plea deal got him 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and permanent prohibition from gambling establishments. He also agreed to testify against Eddie Mancuso and 17 other members of the organization. It's the best outcome we could have hoped for, Hannah told me. No prison time, and he gets to rebuild his life. If he can, I said. That's the real question, isn't it? Not what the court mandates, but what he actually does with his second chance. Jessica filed for divorce the day Brad's sentencing was finalized. I need to close this chapter, she told me. Not with anger, just with clarity. We're both going to be okay, just not together. Brad took it well, or at least quietly. He moved into a small apartment across town, started working at a nonprofit that helped gambling addicts, and attended meetings 3 times a week. He called Jessica occasionally, checking in, making sure she was okay, never pushing for reconciliation. He's actually being respectful, Jessica said one evening. It's weird. This version of Brad, the clean, honest, humble one, this is who I thought I was marrying. Turns out, he had to lose everything to become that person. Some people need to hit bottom before they can rise, I said. The question is whether he can stay there, or if he'll slip back once life gets comfortable again. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Jessica got a job offer in Seattle. Good position, great salary, a chance to start completely fresh. What do you think, Mom? She asked. Should I take it? What do you want? I want to stay near you, but I also want to prove I can survive on my own, that I'm not dependent on you to rescue me anymore. Then go, I said. Prove it to yourself. I'll still be here. This house isn't going anywhere, and neither am I. She left on a Tuesday morning. I watched. Her drive away, her car loaded with boxes, her life packed up and portable. She looked excited and terrified, the way all good adventures begin. The house felt empty after she left. Too quiet, too big, but also peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. I went back to my sewing, taking on commissions again. Word had spread about my work, and suddenly I had more business than I could handle. Brides came to me wanting custom dresses, something unique, something made with care instead of mass-produced. You're famous, my neighbor told me. People are calling you the dress whisperer. They say you make magic with fabric. I just sew, I said, but it felt good to be recognized, to have my work valued, to be seen as something more than just someone's mother or widow or victim. Brad came by sometimes, bringing groceries, asking if I needed anything fixed around the house. You don't have to do this, I told him. I know, he said, but I want to. Not to earn forgiveness or prove anything, just because it's right. You saved my life when you didn't have to. The least I can do is help you with gutters. So I let him fix the broken step on the porch. Let him paint the fence, Let him be useful in small ways that required nothing from me but acceptance. "How are you doing, Brad?" I asked one afternoon while he was weeding the garden. "Really?" He sat back on his heels, thinking. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I go to meetings. I work with other addicts. I'm learning to live without the high of gambling, without the rush of risk. It's boring sometimes, but boring is better than destroyed." "And Jessica?" "I hope she's happy," he said simply. "I mean that. I hope Seattle is everything she needs. I hope she finds someone who treats her better than I did. I hope she builds a life she's proud of." "That's very mature." "I'm trying to grow up," he said. 20 years late, but better late than never. A year passed, then 2. Jessica thrived in Seattle, sending pictures of her apartment, her friends, her life. She came home for Christmas and Thanksgiving, staying in her old room, falling into easy conversation like she'd never left. Brad moved to another city, started dating someone, continued his recovery work. He sent me a letter once, thanking me again, telling me he'd been sober 3 years, that his life had meaning now, that he thought about my lesson every day. And me? I kept sewing, kept living in the house that almost wasn't mine, kept Thomas's roses growing, kept working and creating and being myself. The house that almost was sold, that almost stopped being my home, now felt more mine than ever, because I'd fought for it, because I'd nearly lost it and chose to reclaim it, because some things are worth the battle. On the anniversary of the day Jessica told me about the sale, I sat at my kitchen table with my morning coffee. I pulled out the original deed, the one that had saved everything, and read it again. Dorothy and Thomas Chen, purchased 1983. This property has witnessed 42 years of life, of joy and sorrow, of wedding dresses and betrayals, of losses and redemptions, and it's still standing, still mine, still home. I folded the deed carefully, put it back in its envelope, and returned it to the safe deposit box where it belonged. Not because I might need it again, but because some documents are proof of who we are, proof that we survived, proof that we fought for what mattered. Team Dorothy or Team Jessica? I'll tell you now what I wouldn't have been able to tell you at the beginning. There are no teams. There's only family, messy and complicated and hurtful and beautiful all at once. I made mistakes. So did Jessica. So did Brad. We're all just people trying our best, failing, learning, trying again. Was I right to help them? To pay the debts? To fight for the house? I honestly still don't know. Some days I think I was too soft. Other days I think I was too hard. Most days I think I did exactly what needed doing. No more, no less. But here's what I do know. I'm 74 now. I'm sitting in my kitchen, sewing a wedding dress for a bride I'll never meet, drinking coffee from Thomas's favorite mug, living in a house that's mine in every way that matters. And that's enough. That's everything. Drop your final verdict in the comments. Tell me if I was a fool or a hero, or just a woman who loved her daughter too much. I'll read everyone because I genuinely want to know. And if you're dealing with your own family crisis, your own betrayal, your own impossible choice between love and self-respect, I want you to know something. You'll survive it. You'll make the wrong choice sometimes. You'll question everything. But you'll survive. Because that's what we do. We survive, we rebuild, and we keep going. Next week, I'm sharing something different. My neighbor's story. She's 68, and her son just announced he's taking control of her finances because she's too old to manage money. You should hear what she did. Subscribe if you want to hear more confessions like mine. More stories about women who refused to disappear just because someone decided we were inconvenient. We're still here. We're still fighting, and we're not done yet.